Chapter 4. Consider the paperclip. Read a book, write a book report, draw a picture. That was the assignment Mrs. Jules put on the board. Dana's picture showed a giraffe studying a map. She had drawn a large question mark over the giraffe's head. Her book report only had to be 1 page, but she had written 2 whole pages. The Lost Giraffe was her favorite book ever. Now all she needed was a paperclip. She searched her desk. She found quite a few pencils, mostly broken. There were lots of eraser bits and crayon nubs. There was also a crumb-covered pink piece of paper that had come off the bottom of a cupcake. Oh no, she moaned as she continued to search. She raised her hand. Yes, Dana, said Mrs. Jules. I need a new paperclip. But I gave you one at the beginning of the year, said Mrs. Jules. I know, Mrs. Jules. I'm sorry. I just can't find it. Mrs. Jules sighed. I am very disappointed in you, Dana. I need a paperclip too, said Joe. Mrs. Jules glared at him. What did you do with the one I gave you? She demanded. I think I used it on my science homework, said Joe. I handed that back yesterday, said Mrs. Jules. Didn't you save the paperclip? I guess not, Joe admitted. Bebe was finishing up the last part of her picture. Paperclip, please, she said without looking up from her work. One for me too, said Calvin. Mrs. Jules slammed her hand on her desk. Do you think paperclips grow on trees? She asked. I don't know, said Calvin. I gave each one of you a paperclip at the beginning of the year. It was your responsibility to take care of it. She opened her desk drawer, took out her paperclip box, and opened it. There are only 6 left, she said in dismay. Oh, can I have one? Said Joy. I can't find mine. Mrs. Jules was too angry to reply. She moved to the front of the room. You children are so spoiled, she said. Do you have any idea of what it takes to just make 1 paperclip? She held up one of her last remaining paperclips. Look at the perfect double loop and the way it gleams in the light, almost like a mirror. Her anger started to melt away as she marveled at the magnificent metal masterpiece. It takes a lot of very talented people and years of training and hard work, she explained. First, there's the wire maker. Paperclip wire has to be just right, not too stiff, but not too wiggly either. Then there's the wire polisher, she continued. That's who gives the paperclip its special gleam. And the wire cutter, who cuts each wire to the precise length. And finally, and most important, the master bender. The bender carefully bends the wire into the perfect double loop. She put her hand over her heart. Sadly, in these rush, hurry days, not many young people study the art of paperclip bending. There are only a handful of master benders left in the whole world. And who knows, in 20 or 30 years, there might not be any. Everyone will have to switch to staples. Oh, that is so sad, said Dana. Mrs. Jules gave the paperclip to Dana. Now don't lose it. I won't, promised Dana. Let me see, said Bebe. Dana proudly showed Bebe her new paperclip. It's so beautiful, said Bebe, admiring the double loops. I never noticed before. I'm going to be a paperclip bender when I grow up, said Calvin. Mrs. Jules smiled at Calvin. She had never been more proud of a student. Chapter 5. Eric, and what's his name? Oh, that's right, Eric. There are 3 Erics in Mrs. Jules' class. Eric Fry, Eric Bacon, and the other one that everybody forgets. Eric Ovens. Eric Fry is strong and fast. He's usually the first one chosen when picking teams. Eric Bacon is funny, clever, and just a little bit sneaky. Everyone in Mrs. Jewell's class likes him, but nobody really completely trusts him. Eric Ovens is kind, quiet, and 100% trustworthy. Sadly, that kind of person is often overlooked. But not today, he thought as he sat at his desk, patiently waiting for Mrs. Jewell to finish taking attendance. Today would be his day of glory. In his pocket was a plastic bag with 83 nail clippings. 2 numbers had been written on the blackboard, 71 and 2,677. So far, the class had collected a total of 2,677 nail clippings. 71 was the most brought by anybody in the class. They didn't just have to be toenails. Fingernails counted too. Eric Ovens took his bag out of his pocket and put it on his desk. "How many have you got?" whispered Kathy, who sat next to him. Eric did not want to jinx his big day by saying the number out loud. Besides, he knew Kathy would only say something mean or mock him. Mrs. Jewell closed her attendance book. "Anyone have any nail clippings this morning?" Eric Ovens raised his hand. "Yes, Eric," said Mrs. Jewell. Eric Ovens quietly pushed his chair back, but before he could get up, he saw Eric Fry already making his way to the front of the room. 40, said Eric Fry proudly. Eric Fry had kept his hand in his fist all morning. Everybody thought he was just trying to be tough. Now he opened his fist and let 40 nail clippings fall into the collection bucket. "Well done, Eric," said Mrs. Jewell. Everyone clapped their hands. Eric Ovens smiled as he clapped his hands too. 83 was more than double 40. Eric Fry did the math on the board. 2677 plus 40, 2717. "Oh, halfway to a million," cheered Stephen. Not quite," Allison told him. "Anyone else?" said Mrs. Jewell. Again, Eric Ovens raised his hands. But Eric Bacon had already hopped out of his seat and was headed towards the front of the room. He handed Mrs. Jewell a plastic bag full of nail clippings. 349, he declared triumphantly. The class went wild. Sherry gasped. Stephen fell out of his chair. Eric Bacon danced around Mrs. Jewell's desk like a football player who had scored a touchdown. Mrs. Jewell was skeptical of the spectacle. "I could count them," she warned. Eric stopped dancing. "Go ahead," he challenged her. Mrs. Jewell stared Eric Bacon in the eye. Eric Bacon stared right back. Mrs. Jewell dumped the bag on her desk and divided the clippings into 4 piles. She asked Damien, Allison, and John to help. They each took a pile, and then Mrs. Jewell added their totals together. 349, she announced, just as Eric said. Again, everyone cheered, and Eric Bacon continued his victory dance. How did you get so many? Mrs. Jewell asked him. Eric B. stopped dancing. I went door to door asking my neighbors, he said. Everyone laughed. Leslie had sold wrapping paper door to door, but she couldn't imagine anyone asking for toenails. It's easier than asking for money, said Eric. Everyone was happy to donate. He erased the number 71 and put 349 in its place, and then he did the math. 2717 plus 349 equals 3,066. Ha! Almost 1 million, Stephen called out. Not even close, muttered Allison. Mrs. Jewell told Eric Bacon to take a Tootsie Roll Pop from her coffee can. He took one, and then when she wasn't looking, he took another. Anyone else? Said Mrs. Jewell. Eric Ovens sat glumly at his desk. Raise your hand, urged Kathy. Why bother, he muttered. Kathy got up from her seat and stood next to him. She grabbed Eric's arm and raised it for him. Eric Ovens brought a whole lot, she announced. Bring them on up, said Mrs. Jules. He had no choice. It's just 83, he said, and then he emptied his bag into the nail bucket. That's the second most ever, shouted Kathy. She started clapping. Amazingly, everyone else clapped too. They were still clapping as he did the math on the board. 3,066 plus 83, 3,149. Ha! That's closer to a million, exclaimed Stephen. Everyone cheered. Even Allison couldn't argue with that. Chapter 6. Oppositosis. Eric Ovens wasn't the only one who had noticed that Kathy had become nice. Others, too, began to notice her odd behavior. I like your picture, Kathy told Bibi. What's wrong with it? Bibi said. Nothing, said Kathy. It's perfect. You are very talented. It took Bibi a moment to realize that Kathy hadn't insulted her. Mrs. Jules also noticed the change. Kathy, will you come up here, please? She asked. Kathy approached her teacher's desk. Yes, Mrs. Jules, she asked. Mrs. Jules smiled. You have been doing so well, Kathy. I've noticed a real improvement in your work and in your attitude. That must be because you're such a good teacher, said Kathy. Well, thank you, said Mrs. Jules, but there's a tiny little problem. I'm having a hard time reading your homework. What do you mean? Look at it, said Mrs. Jules, showing Kathy her most recent homework assignment. What's wrong with it? Said Kathy. First thing we learned in psychiatrist school, Dr. Pickle said as he patted DJ on the head. My hiccups are all gone, DJ told Kathy. Who cares? Kathy grumbled. Would you mind stepping into my office, young lady? Said Dr. Pickle. But he's the sick one, said Kathy, pointing at DJ. Please, said Dr. Pickle. She entered the counselor's office. That beard is really ugly. I guess your face must be even worse, huh? Dr. Pickle didn't get angry. He just stroked his beard and said, Very interesting. Kathy sniffed. Smells like pickles, she commented. Very interesting indeed, said the counselor and asked her to sit down. Kathy sat on the couch. Lumpy, she complained. I'm going to try a little experiment, said Dr. Pickle. I'm going to say a word, and then I want you to say the first word that pops into your head. Well, that's dumb, said Kathy. I haven't started yet, said Dr. Pickle. Sloppy, said Kathy. Dr. Pickle realized he had better hurry up and get started. Cold, he began. Hot, Kathy replied. Hard, soft, skinny, fat. This is kind of fun, isn't it, Kathy? Said Dr. Pickle. No, it's boring, said Kathy. Oh, worse than I thought, said Dr. Pickle. I studied your condition in psychiatry school. I'm afraid you have a bad case of oppositosis. No, I don't. You do. Dr. Pickle stroked his beard. Unfortunately, there's no cure for oppositosis. Other psychiatrists had tried to help their patients learn to be kind and think positively. Dr. Pickle knew that would never work on Kathy. He had his own theory, however. He could try to turn her opposites into double opposites. He opened his desk drawer and took out his pickle stone and chain. Kathy watched the green stone as it gently swung back and forth. She fell asleep on the count of 5. Can you hear me, Kathy? He said. And I can smell you too, she replied. You are looking into a mirror, he told her. I am looking into a mirror, Kathy repeated, eyes closed. Tell me what you see. I see a beautiful girl with black hair, and I see a funny-looking man with a pointy beard. Very good. Now, I want you to reach out and touch the mirror. Kathy slowly moved her arm. But as you try to touch it, said Dr. Pickle, you'll discover the mirror isn't solid. Your hand will go right through. Kathy slowly moved her arm. She stuck it out farther. That's weird, she said. Now, stand up and walk through the mirror. Kathy stood up. She took one step and another. She hesitated for a moment and took one last step. Amazing, she exclaimed. You are on the other side of the mirror, said Dr. Pickle. What do you see? Kathy looked around. Nice office, she said. Smells nice, too. I'm glad you like it. Would you like to sit on the couch? Kathy sat back down. Very comfortable, she noted. When I count to 3, you will wake up. But you will still be on the other side of the mirror. 1, 2, 3. Kathy opened her eyes. How do you feel? He asked her. Fine, thanks. How are you? Very well, thank you. Do you mind if we continue with our little experiment? Sounds like fun, said Kathy. Happy, said Dr. Pickle. Smile, said Kathy. Smart, said Dr. Pickle. Mrs. Jules, said Kathy. Friend, said Dr. Pickle. DJ, said Kathy. Dr. Pickle led her to the door. Thank you, Dr. Pickle, she said, shaking his hand. You are very wise, and I like your beard. What is wrong with my homework? Asked Kathy. It's written backwards, said Mrs. Jules. Every sentence, every word, every letter, even the numbers are backward. Looks normal to me, said Kathy. Do you want me to do it over? Mrs. Jules sighed. No, that's all right, Kathy. I'm just happy to see you're doing so well. I'll figure it out. Chapter 7. The closet that wasn't there. Mac was a curious kid. When Miss Mush served chicken fingers, he asked her how many fingers a chicken had on each hand. After lunch, he played basketball. Besides playing, he was also the self-appointed announcer, describing every shot, every pass, and every dribble. Jenny finally told him to put a sock in it. Only then, when he stopped talking, did Mac remember that he'd left his catcher's mask in the cafeteria. Catcher's mask. Mac liked to wear his catcher's mask for all sports, including basketball. He was a curious kid. The cafeteria was on the 15th floor. Mac found his mask right where he'd left it, but by then it hardly seemed worth it to go all the way back down to the playground. So he continued on up to the 30th story. And there, just outside his classroom door, was the most curious thing that Mac had ever seen. Next to the wall, there was some kind of a giant closet. It hadn't been there before lunch. But that wasn't what made it curious. The closet was wrapped in heavy chains and locked with a giant padlock. Mac moved closer. Behind the chains, he could see double doors with a steel bar clamped across them. Several signs were taped to the door. Keep back. Do not open doors. Danger. Call the fire department if you smell something unusual. Mac sniffed, but all he could smell were chicken fingers. Behind the chains and the steel bar, each door had its own lock. You could see 2 keyholes, one red and the other green. He put on his catcher's mask just to be safe and tried to open one door and then the other. They wouldn't budge. He tried to peer through the keyholes, but they were too tiny. He knocked on one of the doors. It seemed to be made of thick wood. Anyone in there? He called. There was no answer. He knocked again, then pressed his ear against the side of the closet. Still nothing. What's that? Said Dee Dee, coming behind him. Mac shrugged. Dee Dee read the signs aloud. Keep back. Do not open. Danger. She tried one of the doors. I think it's locked, said Mac. More kids made it up the stairs. Each one stopped at the closet, read the signs, and tried to open the doors. Terrence kicked the doors. Jason rattled the chain. Look, it's one long chain wrapped around 4 times. What do you think is inside? Asked Leslie. Snakes, said Paul. He was afraid of snakes. Spiders, said Rhonda. She was afraid of spiders. Monsters, said Allison. She loved monsters. What if it's Mrs. Gorf? Guessed Kelvin. Ugh, everyone shuddered. Mrs. Gorf was the worst teacher they'd ever had. Give me a boost, said Mac. Jenny cupped her hands and Mac stepped up first onto Jenny's hands, then onto the steel bar. He gripped the top edge of the closet and tried to shimmy up. Get away from there, shouted Mrs. Jules. All of you. She had returned from the teacher's lounge, only to see the children hanging all over the closet like monkeys. Mac, get down now. Mac tried to hop down, but his foot got tangled in the chains, and he fell on his back. Oh, I think I broke my tailbone, he complained. You're lucky that's all you broke, said Mrs. Jules. What's inside? Said Terrence. Never you mind, said Mrs. Jules. Don't you children know the meaning of danger? You're not to go anywhere near my closet. Don't look in it. Don't even think about it. It's not there. But I can see it, said Mac, lying on the floor. It's not there, said Mrs. Jules. But no ifs, ands, or buts, said Mrs. Jules. Everyone shuffled inside the classroom. Mac was still on the floor. He stood up and adjusted the catcher's mask, which had come cockeyed, and he fell. He took one last look at the closet that wasn't there, and then walked into the classroom, more curious than ever.